The Bible reveals Satan is the mastermind who is driving the establishment of the end-time world government. Global warming, climate change is one of the methods of deception to scare people into compliance. We will expose Satan's efforts to deceive mankind in the end time on today's edition of End of the Age. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries, and thank you for joining me on this edition of End of the Age. Now, one of the things I like to focus on is world government, world religion. I mean, Irvin deals a lot with Israel and the elections and all these different things, and honestly, those guys still don't have it all figured out yet. So I'm going to be dealing today again with world government. And we're talking about global warming, climate change. And I know I talk about that a lot, but this is one of the things that the United Nations loves to kind of cram down your throat, honestly. It's total propaganda. And because the Bible talks about a world government, prophesies a world government in the end time, and Satan is behind that, we've got to talk about it because Satan's method is deception. And there are a lot of people that are buying into this. And as I go through here, you'll see, but one of the reasons, if you're watching on social networking, I'm not on camera today, is because there's an article I'm going to want to go through here in just a little bit that I couldn't bring up on the big screen. And so, you've got to hear what's in this article. So I'll be going through that in just a moment, but let me set a little groundwork before I get there. You know that global warming, and you've heard all the Democratic candidates, they had a whole town hall meeting designed to focus on global warming, climate change. And it's all propaganda that comes from the United Nations, the seat of world government in the earth today. So what's behind it all? Well, the global warming fear-mongering is simply a scheme put together by global elites to redistribute the wealth of the world and to move us into a world governing body. Global warming, which leads to climate change, results in all sorts of supposedly weather catastrophes and becoming an existential threat. You've heard that term many times to the human race. It's all propaganda originating, again, with the United Nations. And if you don't know it, it absolutely is the seat of world government today. Many people think, oh, it's this great humanitarian organization. No. It's world government in the earth today. And you do realize that, and this is very important, that doomsayers have been predicting climate and environmental disasters for over 50 years now. And get this, none of those apocalyptic predictions with due dates as of today have come true. Now think about that, because then you look at all the doomsayers today and you say, well, over the past 50 years, none of those things have come true. Why should I pay attention to the ones that are talking about it now? It's a very important question, and that's what the article I'm going to go through. It's very eye-opening. Now, I'll get to the prophesied world government and who is behind it and many of those failed predictions in just a moment. But, you know, you would think, like I said, after all those failed predictions, you got to think twice about all the fake news on global warming today. Now, according to, and this is happening tomorrow, according to the Global Climate Strike website, tomorrow morning, September 20, a global climate strike is going to spread across the globe to a total of 156 countries for a week of action through September 27. And it's going to bring together millions of people, villages, towns, cities, along with scientists, faith groups, unions, companies that will take to the streets and join the children who have led the way. But in the U.S., workers in major tech companies like Amazon, Facebook, and Microsoft are going to walk out of work to demand their companies take real action on climate change. 6,300 websites, including Kickstarter, Tumblr, and Tor, will be green screening their sites, directing visitors to the Climate Strike website as part of this digital climate strike. And globally, over 2,500 businesses are supporting the strikes. And get this, in the United States, there's a huge mobilization that will see over 1,000 protests across the country. And in New York City, public schools have been given permission for all 1.1 million students to skip classes tomorrow in order to participate in the strike. And they say that Friday is going to be an extraordinary show of global power. Well, all of this stems, this global climate strike that will start tomorrow and go for a week, all stems from the propaganda that's put out by the United Nations for the last several decades. And I'll get into that in a little bit too. For the last several decades, pushing this global warming, climate change hoax in an effort to control you and me.
We've seen Bible prophecy fulfilled like never before. From the halls of the United Nations to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Endtime Ministries continues to reveal the Bible prophecy in the news headlines around the world every day. Whether it's through our broadcast or online at our Jerusalem Prophecy College, your gifts enable us to put vital materials in the hands of those who need it most. Because of you, we continue to replace fear with faith in the hearts of Christians around the world. We will continue to see prophecy come to pass at an even swifter pace. We need your support. Your donation of any amount enables us to continue to broadcast and be a voice in the ever-growing censored media. To become a partner or give a one-time gift, visit endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME right now. That's 800-363-8463. Go online now. Visit endtime.com.
Have you had a longing to visit the cities where Jesus healed, ministered, and taught every day? Judy and I would like to invite you to travel to the wonderful land of Israel. Experience the Word of God in vivid color while walking down the roads of the Holy Land with us.
When you are ready to experience Israel, we recommend you travel with Endtime Ministries. You will not only experience historical and present-day Israel, you will also learn about the prophesied future to come. It's as if we traveled back in time to visit a different era and discovered ourselves in an ancient time. The tour is very well organized, the accommodations are first class, and the food is delicious. If you have ever had a desire to visit Israel, there is no better time than now. Ann from Colorado.
To sign up to receive your Experience Israel 2019 packet, call Adrian or Jana at 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com. We can't wait to experience Israel with you.
So you'll probably see it. Maybe some of your kids will ask you, hey, there's going to be a climate strike tomorrow around the globe, and I want to participate in that. And so you wonder, what in the world is all of this about? Well, what are they asking for? Well, they say that the climate crisis is an emergency. We want everyone to start acting like it. We demand climate justice for everyone. Our hotter planet is already hurting millions of people. If we don't act now to transition fairly and swiftly away from fossil fuels to 100% renewable energy for all, the injustice of the climate crisis will only get worse. We need to act right now to stop burning fossil fuels. What does the climate strike demand? Get this. They demand a Green New Deal. So you don't have to wonder, does all this come from the United Nations? Absolutely. And you've heard about a Green New Deal lately by some of the Democratic presidential candidates and others. So the Green New Deal, they say that we want to transform our economy to 100% clean renewable energy by 2030 and phase out all fossil fuel extractions. Now, do you remember, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, where Fox News ran a report and it said that Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's chief of staff admitted that the Green New Deal she was proposing was not conceived as an effort to deal with climate change, but instead a how do you change the entire economy thing. Remember, I said the global warming climate change, that's all a hoax, okay? So Sakat Chakrabarty, he actually said, now again, this is Ocasio-Cortez's chief of staff, he said the interesting thing about the Green New Deal is it wasn't originally a climate thing at all. He said, do you guys think of it as a climate change thing? Because we really think of it as how do you change the entire economy? That's the goal of the Green New Deals. Many people see these Green New Deals that are being proposed as a veiled socialistic takeover of the U.S. economy. And if you read down through there, some of them, go to Bernie Sanders' website and read his Green New Deal and what all he's proposing to do. That's exactly what it looks like. You know, honestly, just about every Democratic presidential candidate has laid out their very own Green New Deal. And of course, Bernie Sanders costs just over 16, and this is with a T, $16 trillion. And, you know, Green New Deals, let's talk about that just for a second. Green New Deals, really, they're efforts to implement the United Nations socialistic blueprint to govern the world, Agenda 2030, and the Sustainable Development Goals. I mean, think about it. Back in April, Mayor de Blasio, he announced New York City's Green New Deal. It was this bold, audacious plan to attack global warming on all fronts. And it actually said this in his plan. He said, this is what New York City's Green New Deal will do. It's going to align with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. With one New York City was the first city to map our local strategy to the Sustainable Development Goals and to submit a voluntary local review to the United Nations. Now think about that. A United States city giving a local review to the seat of world government in the earth. And it says the voluntary local review monitors New York's advancement towards the goals, identifies areas where we can learn from others, and addressing remaining challenges by demonstrating directly in our strategy how the One NYC aligns with the Sustainable Development Goals. We strengthen our efforts to build a strong and fair city and deepen the city diplomacy that makes New York City a leader on the world stage. So when you think about these Green New Deals, think about efforts to align with the Sustainable Development Goals in the Agenda 2030. It's the United Nations blueprint, socialistic blueprint to govern the world. Are you hearing what I'm saying? The Bible prophesies there's going to be an end time world government, and these Sustainable Development Goals are one of the, they're the blueprint right now by the United Nations to move us towards that world governing body, to govern every person on the planet. And these Green New Deals are efforts by people in the United States to move us in that direction. So when you hear all these Democratic candidates, presidential candidates that are offering Green New Deals, keep that in mind. It's very important. So you say, well, end time world government. Now, I'm going to get to this article that has all these failed predictions in just a moment. But again, I'm laying a little groundwork here because we're living through this right now. This isn't light years away in some kind of a Star Wars scenario. This is 2019, everybody. And we're really at the culmination of it. We're not at the beginning. They've been harping on this stuff for decades now. And it's simply a hoax. And you'll know that in great detail by the time I'm done. So the prophesied world government, Revelation chapter 13, verse 1 through 2. John said, and I stood up on the sand of the sea, saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon his horns 10 crowns, upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. Feet as the feet of the bear, mouth as the mouth of the lion. And the dragon gave him his power, seat, and great authority. This is a symbolic view. In Daniel chapter 7, these nations are, or these beasts are symbolized nations. When you get to Revelation 13, these nations have federalized into a one world governing body. So it says the dragon gave him his seat, power, and great authority. Who's the dragon? And Revelation 12:9 says, and the dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan. Here's a very key statement in Revelation 12:9. It says the serpent is called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. This is exactly what the global warming climate change hoax is designed to do. The United Nations, the world government in the earth today, is Satan's effort to establish his kingdom on the earth. And their propaganda, this global warming climate change hoax that they're putting out, is a very, very deceptive message. I mean, think of it. There are people that have bought into this all around the world, and they're going to be striking tomorrow for 1 week. From the 20th through the 27th, a global climate strike. And the Bible says that the devil, that the dragon that deceives the whole world. Global warming, climate change, which leads to all these catastrophes and weather catastrophes and all this stuff, it's a hoax. And I know there are leading news sources that are saying, oh no, we've only got so many years left to save the planet. That's not true. The Bible specifically tells us, after the second coming of Jesus Christ in the Battle of Armageddon, that this earth that we're standing on will be here for another 1,000 years. Yet, folks, the fact of the matter is God is controlling all this. I know I've said that a lot of times. Irvin says that, but there are a lot of people that they've simply taken God out of the equation. You cannot do that. We are simply human beings. I mean, I am a glorified dust ball that is just carrying around my spirit, awaiting to go to be with the Lord for eternity. That's all we are. We're the creature. God is the creator. He created all of this. And so you cannot take God out of the equation. The Bible says, let God be true and let all men be a liar. And so the fact of the matter is that God is the supreme authority, period. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. You take God out of the equation, and then you get this kind of stuff. You get a world government that has to scare everybody into compliance, and so they've got to come up with methods to do that, and false narratives, and fake news, and propaganda. Well, one of the biggest today is this global warming, climate change hoax. And so the Bible says that Satan will deceive the world, will deceive the nations many times in the Bible. Revelation chapter 20. The Bible, when the Bible talks about Satan being bound for 1,000 years. Revelation 20 verse 1 through 3 says, then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon, that old serpent who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And he cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal upon him. Here it is, so that he should deceive the nations no more. He's not going to be spreading this global warming climate change hoax on everybody, trying to scare them into conformity. The Bible says that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years were finished. But after these things, he must be released for a little while. Then down in Revelation 20, down in verse 7 and 8, it says, now when the 1,000 years was expired, Satan will be released from his prison. Now get this. he will go out. What's he going to do? The first thing, he's going to go out to deceive the nations again, which are in the four corners of the earth. Now, Satan can't help himself. The truth is not in him. He's the father of liars. So his kingdom, the world government in the earth today, it can't help itself. It's based on a lie. And so the fact of the matter is that when you get to this global warming, climate change hoax, all of these globalists and people that are pushing for this world governing body, they've bought into this. I think they bought into it enough to where they almost actually believe it. And all of their media that's bought and paid for, they run stories all the time, and they'll give you graphs and charts of how all this stuff, you know, that the sea levels are going to rise and the polar bears are going to die off and the ice, the polar ice caps are going to melt and this, that, and the other. None of that's true, everybody. And so somebody has got to tell the truth about this stuff. Now, there are people out there that are telling the truth, but you got to search. It's like a needle in a haystack. And so my goal today is to expose Satan's efforts to deceive the nations, because I don't want to be deceived, and we don't want you guys to be deceived. This is the establishment of the prophesied world government in the end time. So the question is, though, my question, why don't people wake up? I mean, it's pretty easy to see that some of this stuff is a hoax if you do your research. Now, if you're just listening to certain news sites every evening at 7 o'clock or whatever, they're probably not going to tell you this is a hoax. They're going to be saying, oh, all the rain in Houston that's happening right now, 2 or 3 feet of rain, that's all a result of global warming and climate change. I promise you, you will hear that. But yet, in somewhere else, they'll say a drought is a result of global warming and climate change. Or when it's real hot in the summer, they'll say that's a result of global warming, climate change. But yet when we have a polar vortex this winter in January when it's, 30 below zero somewhere, they'll say that's a result of global warming, climate change. I mean, it's simply not true, everybody. I mean, the fact of the matter is that the global warming, climate change, existential threat message from the United Nations and almost every global leader, I mean, that's why you wonder why they hate Donald Trump so much. Because he's not bought into all this stuff and they can't stand it. Because the United States is not on board right now. And global leaders, including Pope Francis, it's all a complete hoax. And, even this upcoming Monday, I think it's the 23rd maybe, the United Nations is going to hold a climate action summit to push ways to control the climate. But that's all a ruse. They've been holding them summits for decades now. Nothing's changed. All they're trying to do is to figure out a way to redistribute the wealth of the world. That's what this all boils down to when you peel all the layers of the onion, get down to the core of it. They're trying to redistribute wealth. That's easily proven. And again, the United Nations is focused on this for decades. They've been having these climate summits and things like this for decades now. And when you look at it, there are all these failed climate predictions. Now, I've got an article that I want to go through. I wish that you guys could all see this. I will give you the title to the article. You can go there. And if you want to look it up, it's from the Competitive Enterprise Institute. And the title of the article is Wrong Again. 50 years of failed apocalyptic predictions. And if you email me, D. Robbins, D. Norvell, or D. Norvell, Doug Norvell, at endtime.com, I can shoot you the link to the article, or you can go look it up yourself. But think about it. Modern doomsayers, and you've heard them all. I mean, the climate town hall that all the presidential Democrats, the Democratic presidential Democrats just had, it was all about being a doomsayer and saying that you've only got so much time left to save our planet, or it's going to burn up, and we're not going to leave a sustainable planet for our children and grandchildren. I mean, they're trying to scare you to death. I've got children and I've got a grandchild. And they're trying to scare me into conformity. But it's not true, everybody. And they've been predicting climate and environmental disasters since the 60s. And they continue to do it today. But none of these apocalyptic predictions with due dates, like 10 years or 2 years, this, that, and the other, none of them have come true. And this article has a list of these wild predictions that people in the government and science, I mean, you would think these people, they really knew what they were talking about. I mean, they're supposed to be the authority on this stuff, but none of this stuff's come true. It's been scare tactics. And they compiled a list of these, and they, more than spotlighting really the failed predictions, it shows the makers of these things were very important, influential people. And these predictions have been and continue to be enthusiastically reported by the media. They're eager for sensational headlines, sensationalistic things. And the failures are typically not revisited. Once they give one of these predictions and they say, in 10 years, this is, where the sea levels are going to rise 20 feet. Well, in 10 years, that comes and goes, and nobody goes back and holds their feet to the fire and says, but you said this. It's all a hoax. And so when we get back from the break, I'm going to go through some of this article. It's really going to blow your mind, because a lot of people during these times, 50, 60 years ago, were scared to death. And so in the name of security, people are willing to yield sovereignty for their protection.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter. This book by Irvin's grandson provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your relationship with God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at Endtime will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Get your book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
If ever people needed to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for Endtime magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will impact your life. Endtime has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that Endtime magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and leave them in doctor's offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine has done in many lives. Call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and get your subscription today.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archive button.
All right, so let's go down through some of this article here, and it's really kind of amazing because some of these predictions, which are decades old now, will sound like some of the people you've been hearing in the news today. And I'll get to some of that here in a minute as well, but you need to hear about this because these have been happening for a long, long time, and none of them have come to pass. This is all the way back in 1967. That would be what, 52 years ago now? 52 years. It said there's going to be a dire famine by 1975. Now, this is back in the Salt Lake Tribune, These are not Mad Magazine, everybody. These are reliable, supposedly reliable news sources. The Salt Lake Tribune. The writer was a Los Angeles Times writer, and he said, it is already too late for the world to avoid a long period of famine. And he's a Stanford University biologist. Paul Ehrlich said, the time of famines is upon us, and we will be at its worst and most disastrous by 1975. He said the population of the United States is already too big that birth control may have to be accomplished by making it involuntary and by putting sterilizing agents into staple foods and drinking water, and that the Roman Catholic Church should be pressured into going along with routine measures of population control. Now, can you imagine reading that after dinner one night? You would think, oh my goodness. But it didn't come to pass. That was back in November 17th, 1967. Then in 1969, the New York Times, there was an article that said everyone will disappear in a cloud of blue steam by 1989. This is August 10th, 1969, the New York Times. The writer said, the trouble with almost all environmental problems, this is the same Paul Ehrlich. Now think about this. The population biologist is that by the time we have enough evidence to convince people, you'll be dead. He said, we must realize that unless we are extremely lucky, everybody will disappear in a cloud of blue steam in 20 years. That was August 10th, 1969. So then the next one, get this. By 1970, the Ice Age, the article's in 1970, it says there's going to be an Ice Age by 2000. This is from the Boston Globe. It says that scientists predict a new Ice Age by the 21st century. Air pollution may obliterate the sun and cause a new Ice Age in the first third of the next century. The demands for cooling water will boil dry the entire flow of the rivers and streams in the continental United States. I mean, I'm sorry, I gotta laugh at some of this stuff because, I mean, I was born in 1968. Of course, this is a 1970s article in the Boston Globe, but I can only imagine my dad and mom reading this stuff being scared out of their mind. And of course, perhaps you, if you lived at that time, thinking, oh my goodness, it's the same stuff we're hearing today, everybody. And I'll get to that in a moment. You'll see what I'm talking about. The next article, 1970, America is subject to water rationing by 1974 and food rationing by 1980. This is the Redlands Dairy Facts, October 6, 1970. This is the same Dr. Ehrlich. I mean, this guy was getting around. He said, it does need saving. The oceans will be as dead as Lake Erie in less than a decade. America will be subject to water rationing by 74 and food rationing by 1980. Then 1971, again, a new ice age is coming. This is from the Washington Post. It says, U.S. scientist sees new ice age coming. Dr. S.I. Rasool of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration and Columbia University says this, in the next 50 years. Now, I want you guys to pay very close attention to this, because what he is saying is going to produce an ice age is what people now is saying is going to produce global warming and climate change and all these catastrophes. Listen very closely. He says in the next 50 years, the fine dust man constantly puts into the atmosphere by fossil fuel burning could screen out so much sunlight that the average temperature could drop by 6 degrees. If sustained over several years, 5 to 10, he says, such a temperature decrease could sufficiently trigger an ice age. But yet we have people today saying that fossil fuel burning is causing the global warming, which leads to climate change. So nobody can really make up their mind here. Then in 1972, a new ice age by 2070. Now this is from Brown University, and it's a letter to the President of the United States back in 72. It says the main conclusion of a meeting that was just held was that a global deterioration of the climate by order of magnitude larger than any hitherto experienced by civilized mankind is a very real possibility and indeed may be due very soon. So they were harping on global warming, climate change again back then. And then in 1974, there's a new ice age coming fast, The Guardian. It actually states in here, it happens that blocking anticyclones play an important role in the characteristics of weather in the northern hemisphere and account for some adverse change in our own climate. Talking about another ice age. Time magazine, 1974, another ice age. It says, telltale signs are everywhere, from the unexpected persistence and thickness of pack ice in the waters around Iceland to the southward migration of a warmth-loving creature like the armadillo from the Midwest. Time magazine predicting an ice age back in 1974. 1974, again, the ozone depletion. A lot of us heard about that. That aerosol cans and this, that, and the other are going to cause the ozone to deplete. They said it's the great peril of life. But the fact of the matter is, no such great peril to life has been observed as the so-called ozone hole remains. Nothing ever happened. And then the New York Times book review in 1976 talks about the cooling. Now, what are they all about now? Global warming, which leads to climate change. Back in 76, they're talking about the cooling. The writer, Stephen Schneider, a young climatologist at the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado, reflecting the consensus of the climatological community. He's saying all the big majority of the scientists in this climatological community agree. In 74, Schneider and Bryson tried to explain to a White House policy-making group why conditions are likely to worsen. One of the most depressing anecdotes in the book is Schneider's description of the deaf ear their warnings received. Another ice age. Of course, it didn't happen. I'm still here, and you're still here. Then in 1980, acid rains kills life in the lakes. It actually says that acid rain, get this, everybody. I'm going to go into detail on this one just a little bit. Acid rain, which has already wiped out the fish in 107 New York's Adirondack mountain lakes, is rapidly killing other lakes in nearby eastern Canada, says an official. He actually said here, I wanted to read you something, that it would go on to contaminate many lakes in the United States. That was from the Noblesville Ledger in 1980. But 10 years later, the U.S. government program formed to study acid rain, and it concluded this. Get this. This is from the Associated Press. 10 years later in 1990, acid rain is no environmental crisis, a study concludes. So they made this huge hype about it, got everybody scared to death that all of our lakes are going to get contaminated by acid rain in 1980. Then in 1990, we formed a new governmental program, and we found out that it's not even an environmental crisis at all. So, sorry guys, just forget about that one. In 1978, no end in sight to the 30-year cooling trend. This is from the New York Times, January 5th, 1978. But according to NASA satellite data, there is a slight warming trend since 1979. In 1988, James Hansen forecasted increased regional droughts in the 90s. He said our climate model simulations for the late 80s and the 90s indicate a tendency for an increase of heat wave drought situations in the southeast and Midwest United States. But the last really dry year in the Midwest was 1988, and recent years have been record wet. I mean, tell that to Houston right now that's got 2 or 3 feet of rain. All this drought. I mean, in 1988, Washington, D.C., that the days over 90 degrees Fahrenheit from 35 to 85. It actually says, this is from the Gannett News Services, if you like last summer's record temperatures, you're going to love the 90s. In the 1990s, says James Hansen, the NASA scientist, who during congressional hearings on the Midwestern drought linked greenhouse warming to a heat wave. He said in Washington, D.C., for instance, it would go from the current 35 days a year to over 90 degrees to 85 days. And get this, the level of the ocean will rise anywhere from 1 to 6 feet. But the number of hot days in D.C., the area, peaked in 1911 and have been declining ever since. And, of course, we know that the Obamas just bought a house up in the Upper East Coast, Martha's Vineyard, and their yard goes off into the ocean. So, I mean, that house is still standing, and evidently they felt comfortable enough to buy a house down by the ocean. And then in 1988, the Maldives, completely underwater in 30 years. Well, guess what? My son-in-law and daughter just got married, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago now, and took their honeymoon. Guess where they went? To the Maldives. It's still there. 1989, rising seas to obliterate to obliterate nations by 2000. Get this. This comes from the United Nations. Rising seas could obliterate whole nations by the year 2000. A senior UN environmental official says entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if the global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000, folks. We're in the year 2019. So as you can see, for the last over 50 years, there have been prediction after prediction after prediction. Not one of them has come to pass that had a date on it. And you know, it kind of sounds like what's happening that you hear today in the news. And I'll get into some of that when we get back.
Many Christians admit end-time Bible prophecy is very complex and difficult to understand, and for some, a little bit scary. But what if you could understand Bible prophecy? What if you could know what will happen and how the United States will play a key role during end-time events? When you call today and get Understanding the End Time DVD curriculum, you can have peace about what is to come while understanding the prophetic events that appear in our headlines every day. When you call or go online to endtime.com and order, you'll learn the answer to the biggest prophecy question of all. Will the rapture take place, and when will it happen? This 14-part DVD series is the definitive end-time prophecy Bible study available. And for this limited time, you can get it for just $149. Don't miss this special offer. Understanding the End Time. Call now. 1-800-363-8463. That's 1-800-END-TIME. Or go to endtime.com today.
You know, yeah, I'll get into some people that are talking about this stuff today, because you'll probably be shocked by some of this, or you may not. We'll see. But I got to go through a couple more of these articles. These are so cool. In the Independent, this is back in Monday, March 20 of 2000. The Independent wrote an article that said that snowfalls are now just the thing of the past. They actually said that snow is starting to disappear and that it was going to end. Snow. I mean, we've had so much snow lately. Tell this to some of them people that are having 3 or 4 or 5 foot snows up in Montana and Wisconsin and all that stuff. Snows are a thing of the past, everybody. Think about that. Children just aren't going to know what snow is. That's the Independent back in 2000. There's another one. Why vegans were right all along. Back in The Guardian in 2002, they said that the famine in the land can only be avoided if the rich give up their meat, fish, and dairy. And then now there's another Guardian article, 2004. Now the Pentagon tells Bush climate change will destroy us. I mean, I could go on and on. I'm not going to do that, but if you want a copy of this article, I mean, it's one of the best articles I've found in a while. So many different climate predictions. Of course, one more. In 2008, of course, you guys all know about this, Al Gore. I mean, he had the Inconvenient Truth movie. He warned, now get this guy's made millions and millions of dollars off of all this, the movies and the whole ball of wax. But in 2008, Al Gore warned of an ice-free Arctic in 2013. Now, we're 2019, okay? Nobody went back, held his feet to the fire and said, hey, you said this, but people are still believing him today. There are people that do that. And he said that we've got 10 years ago, Al Gore predicted the North Polar ice caps would be gone. The problem is, you and I both know they're still there. And so, of course, in 2009, Prince Charles said we've got 96 months left to save the world. But the reason I wanted to bring this up is because of this global warming, climate change scare that we hear today. And I mean, I've got a lot more I could go through, but I won't. You understand that it's all propaganda, folks. Now, we've proven it. Irvin Baxter's written many articles on it. I've written Rick Brandiger. I mean, we've got proof running out our ears. It's a hoax. It's all designed. It's propaganda from the United Nations to govern your life, to govern my life. It's to get us scared into conformity with this blueprint that the United Nations has put out called the Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 2030. They're trying to control our lives, and they want to redistribute the wealth from the developed nations to the underdeveloped nations of the world. It's what it's all about. And so, and into some of their pockets as well, to be honest. But think about it. You remember, I just went through all of these climate predictions for the last over 5 decades. None of them have come to pass. Ice ages and droughts and snow disappearing, the ice caps disappearing. But think of it today. Some of them have said, hey, we had 96 months left to save the world. We've got 10 years left, or there's going to be entire nations covered with water. None of that come to pass. But today, Ocasio-Cortez says the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change, and your biggest issue is how we're going to pay for it. People were balking at her Green New Deal, which was going to cost billions of dollars, and she said, our biggest issue is that the world's going to end in 12 years if we don't know anything in climate change, and you're worried about how we're going to pay for it? Who cares about how we're going to pay for it? We just need to do something. Beto O'Rourke said, the clock is ticking. The scientists tell us that there are roughly 10 years left to free ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuel. Bernie Sanders says climate change is real, human-caused, and already creating devastating problems, that there's a brief window to act before irreparable harm results, and that the United States should shift to cleaner energy sources. Joe Biden said global warming, should it occur in accord with the direst predictions, would be a catastrophe of biblical proportions for the entire world. The human activities that could bring it about, the inefficient burning of fossil fuels, The destruction of tropical forests are occurring right now. And unless these activities are changed in the next few years, a disastrous and irreversible warming could become inevitable. So you can see why I wanted to go through, because you're hearing this. When you hear the debates coming up, they'll be all over Donald Trump because he doesn't believe global warming and climate change, and he pulled us out of the Paris Climate Agreement, which all of the Democratic presidential candidates have said pretty much day one they'll put us back into that agreement. You're hearing that in the debates coming up and this town hall that was just held a week or two ago, that they're saying we've only got a short period of time to attack climate change and global warming, or the earth is just going to, there's going to be irreparable damage and we're not going to leave anything for our kids and grandkids, and we're trying to scare you to death. But they've been doing it, think about it, since before I was born, for several decades now. And none of those things have come to pass. So why would you believe the doomsayers now that are saying it's a hoax and the earth's going to burn up and this, that, and the other? So you say, well, what's all really behind that? Well, the fact of the matter is that there is an effort in the earth today to create a socialistic one world governing body. And that is Satan is trying to build his kingdom. Now, it's very important that we understand this. The Bible says when it gives a depiction of Revelation 13, 1 and 2, that Satan gave it its seat, power, and its great authority. So Satan has always been against God. Satan knows that God is coming back to establish his kingdom in the very near future. So he's trying to establish his kingdom here on the earth. The Bible talks about his kingdom in several places. He's trying to institute a physical kingdom here on the earth to control you and me. It's world government. That's why it's so deceptive, because Satan is the father of lies. The truth is not in him. He could never build a biblical, true world government. It's got to be built on deception. And the United Nations, all these efforts towards a world government is based and built on deception, on a lie. Global warming, climate change, it goes right along with that. It's part of the agenda. And so that's why I wanted to go through all these articles today and then go through some of what you hear in the news every day. There's 10 years left. There's 12 years left. We've got to do something in the next few years, or we're not going to leave anything for our children and grandkids and things like that. That none of that is true. Just like for the last 5 decades, none of these apocalyptic predictions have come to pass. None of this stuff's going to come to pass. All they want to do is redistribute wealth and have a world government. And it's the world government that the Antichrist will reign over, a socialistic world government. And so, I mean, all of us, we've witnessed over the last several years the political successes of open socialistic candidates in government. And, why not? I mean, it sounds great, doesn't it? Who wouldn't want Medicare for all and tuition-free public college, free health care, and government-guaranteed jobs? I mean, that sounds awesome. And, it's what we've all been waiting for, right? I mean, the promise, among others, that they're going to have this miraculous turn in the United States into this perfect utopian society, a community where we rely on this big government to take care of our needs, which, as history records, creates perfect living conditions for the populace, leading to an all-encompassing state of euphoria. Right. It all sounds awesome. Well, the problem is that's wrong. That is as wrong as it gets. Socialism would be the worst thing to happen to America. And, I could be here the rest of the day and tomorrow on just that statement. But socialism always sounds great in the beginning, However, true socialism, the reason I'm talking about socialism is because the United Nations agenda is a socialistic agenda. The United Nations is socialistic. It was designed to be that way. And a true socialism is government ownership and administration of the means of production and distribution of goods. So it's really a governmental noose around the neck of a nation, and history records that that hasn't worked out so well for any society ever. And then, of course, the Bible predicts that the end-time world government of the Antichrist will be a socialistic one-world governing body. Now, I'm not going to have time in the couple minutes that I have left to prove that. We've talked about it many times, how the end-time world governing beast, if you look over in the seven-headed tin-horn beast in Revelation chapter 17, John said, I saw in a vision of the woman, this world religious system, sitting on the back of a scarlet-colored, seven-headed tin-horn beast. Well, it's the world governing beast, but it gives another clue. It says it's scarlet-colored. In Bible prophecy, we know from the first four seals, the red horse or the red spirit, that red or scarlet is the color of socialism or communism in Bible prophecy. And so when the Bible says she sits on it's the union of world religion and world government in the end time, she sits on a scarlet-colored, seven-headed tin-horn beast. The end-time world government's going to be socialistic. That's why it's important to tie all these things together for you on today's program. Because the future one-world governing body, which is, again, the mastermind behind that is Satan himself, it's going to be a socialistic entity. Well, today, the leader, Antonio Guterres, is the leader, the Secretary General of the United Nations, used to be the president of the, the World Socialist Organization. He was the president, I think, for 4 or 5 years. Well, now he is the leader of the United Nations, the Secretary General. And so, if you tie all this together, the socialistic agenda of the United Nations, now you understand the agenda to get everybody in scare mode, to get them to conform to the edicts of this socialistic one-world governing body. That is Satan's method. It's a method of deception. And that's why none of these apocalyptic climate or these predictions that have come out, droughts and ice ages and global warming, none of that's come to pass because at the end of the day, Almighty God, the God of the Bible, is in control.
This has been End of the Age, brought to you by the faithful partners of Endtime Ministries. If you're not currently a partner with Endtime Ministries, or if you would like more information, we invite you to call us at 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or visit us online at endtime.com.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page.